Well, to debate all this, I'm joined by the Grey Zone journalist and co-host of the Useful Idiots podcast, Aaron Maté, and by the former IDF spokesman, Jonathan Conricus. Jonathan and Aaron, welcome back to Uncensored for both of you. Jonathan, you know, whenever I speak to Mustafa Barghouti, he always presents a very compelling case for the other side. Does any part of what he said give you pause for thought?
What is up, everyone? In this clip, Piers Morgan moderates an explosive debate between Aaron Maté and a former IDF spokesperson, Jonathan Conricus. Jonathan attempts to make some of the craziest points and justification for those points that I have ever seen coming out of Israel's side. However, Aaron exposes the contradictions and outright falsehoods in his arguments. Trust me, guys, this is a must-watch if you want to see someone absolutely dismantle propaganda with hard-hitting facts. So without wasting any time, let's get into it. We'll give you guys our feedback as we go through it. As always, let's get into it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And to begin, I will start by committing not to interrupt anybody, even though I'm sure that I will hear things that I don't agree with, and I'm sure that I will hear things that are going to be factually incorrect, but I'm not going to interrupt unless I am interrupted. And I hope we can have a meaningful exchange of points of view and hopefully ground ourselves in fact and not hyperbole. I heard lots and lots of very rich and colorful language by Barghouti, which I think he makes he lies well, but I think it's very rich to hear a representative of the Palestinian Authority educate anybody about democracy and to speak and say as if all of the problems in the Middle East are related to Palestinians. He conveniently omitted that the Palestinians were offered 4 different peace solutions: land for peace and an end to the conflict. He omitted that Israel is the one that has been providing those peace solutions.
This is point number 1 that's absolutely absurd. What he just said to me sounds like the same thing as if you were offering someone a pizza, but you've eaten 80% of it, and then blaming them for refusing your generosity. Those so-called peace offers often come with strings so tight, they choke anyone who accepted them. The settlements alone make it clear these offers were never serious. If you're building walls while offering a handshake, people are going to question your sincerity. These solutions are simply PR stunts designed to make Israel look like a reasonable party while ensuring that Palestinians never get a real seat at the table. This isn't peace. It's propaganda, plain and simple. And yet, this narrative keeps getting pushed as if repeating it enough times will make it true.
And he omitted that he and his leaders, 2 former Palestinian dictators, and I use the word dictators because they were not elected, and I don't think that anybody could argue that Mahmoud Abbas is a democratically elected leader because he's in his 19th or 20th year in a 4-year term. So to hear any lecture about democracy from a representative of a corrupt and horribly, horribly unpopular Palestinian Authority, for me, is vile. And I would suggest a different point of view. And actually, you made some of what you call the Israeli claims. But you know, if the situation in Israel was so horrible, and if all of the propaganda that we hear against Israel, all of these fantastic terms that are being thrown around as if they're weightless, atrocities and war crimes and apartheid and genocide and all of the other nonsense that isn't substantiated by any facts on the ground, and I can challenge anybody that dares to say otherwise. If the situation was so horrible, then why are Syrian nationals, thousands of Syrian nationals, going on the record and asking Israel to come and help them and to actually take control over Syrian territory because they fear for their lives what Sunni jihadists will do against them?
All right. This is such a bad faith argument. The whole "if things were so bad, why would people still ask for help" trope ignores the obvious power dynamics. Syrian nationals are fleeing for their lives. That doesn't magically erase what's happening to Palestinians. It's like saying, well, this neighbor borrowed sugar from me, so I must be an amazing person, while ignoring the house you're bulldozing next door. The logic doesn't make any sense. And honestly, it's insulting to the intelligence of the audience or anyone who watches this. People can see through this rhetoric. People can see through this sleight of hands. If anything, arguments like this highlight just how indefensible the broader situation is. And as the old saying goes, if you're not solving the problem, you're pointing fingers to distract from it.
If any of all of the nonsense that we hear against Israel was true, then why are Arabs or Druze in Syria asking for Israeli protection. Clearly, the situation isn't as it is portrayed in Arab and international media. And Piers, you made a reference here to the amount of casualties. I would like to refer you to a recent study by the Henry Jackson Society by Andrew Fox, one of the researchers there, who simply took apart step by step all of the Hamas figures from the so-called health ministry. Not 44,000, not most of them were civilians, and definitely not indiscriminate killing by the IDF. There are so many inconsistencies in the Hamas numbers, and I really suggest that you and everybody else go have a long, hard read at the document that was just released yesterday, reflected and reported upon in the Telegraph. And last point, you know what worries me the most in that same study? It says that 95%, they did a sample study of mainstream American, Australian, and British media. They did almost 1,500 pieces of, or items, news items. Out of those, 95% of the news sources, they cited Hamas, and the majority of the citations don't even question what Hamas put forward, and they only used 5% information from Israel, and when they did so, they questioned it most of the times. And I think that is really the responsibility of international media, parroting Hamas talking points, parroting Hamas lies, and misleading people around the world into believing that the difficult and sad situation in Gaza is anything than just a war. It is a sad situation, and perhaps the only thing that I agree with Barghouti is that, yes, Palestinians are suffering in Gaza, and the situation there is not a good one from a humanitarian perspective. I agree with that.
Okay.
But that is not because Israel wanted it to be like that. That is because Hamas started a war, and Israel is fighting against Hamas.
I need to move on to, otherwise we're going to run out of time. Aaron, Maté, I mean, what I would say about the Palestinian Health Authority numbers is that historically, their numbers have later been borne out to be remarkably accurate in independent studies of the numbers they've been given. It may be different here, and we'll have to see, but that's certainly, historically, they've turned out to be accurate, which is why people take them seriously. Aaron Maté, your response to Jonathan Conricus.
Yes, on the issue of the death toll in Gaza, the State Department has long relied on the figures supplied by the health ministry. The only people who do not are people who are seeking to justify one of the worst crimes in human history, which is Israel's mass murder campaign in Gaza. If anything, the Gaza Health Ministry's figures are too low, because how can you possibly have a full accounting of the death toll when Gaza Strip has been decimated by Israeli bombardment and so many people are still buried under the rubble? So personally, I feel that even to debate this issue is to lose one's humanity, just as it would be to debate the death toll by the Nazis during the Holocaust. I want to address some other falsehoods. Jonathan said that Palestinians have walked away from all these generous peace offers submitted by Israel. Israel has never accepted the fundamental premise accepted by the entire world, except for the US, that Palestinians have the right to a state in the West Bank in Gaza. 22% of their historic homeland. The rest was stolen by Israel. That's why, for example, just take one famous case. Palestinians are often blamed for walking away from a so-called generous peace offer at Camp David in July 2000. That's the peace offer that everyone likes to cite for why Palestinians have turned down this prospect of a state. Well, even the Israeli foreign minister, who transmitted that offer, Shlomo Ben-Ami, he later said, if I were Palestinian, I would have rejected Camp David as well. That's because he recognized that the Israeli offer would have kept all of Israel's major West Bank settlement blocks that make a Palestinian state impossible without offering Palestinians an equal land swap inside Israel. So Israel's never given Palestinians an offer that even someone willing to make a massive compromise, accepting just 22% of their historic homeland, could take. So this idea that Palestinians have walked away from a peace deal, it's just used to justify mass murder and aggression, and that's why.
This admission from Shlomo Ben-Ami is absolutely damning. When even an Israeli foreign minister says the offer wasn't worth accepting, it's clear what was actually intended behind the quote-unquote deal. How do you sell something as generous when the person presenting it admits themselves they would reject it? The settlement blocks and lack of equal land swaps make it very crystal clear. These weren't peace offers, they were PR stunts designed to shift blame. And this goes to show you how deeply flawed and one-sided the so-called peace process has always been.
During the years of the so-called peace process, the years of the Oslo Accords. Israeli settlements doubled in the occupied territories. How is it you're going to claim you're offering Palestinians peace while meanwhile building up the illegal settlements that make a Palestinian state in just 22% of their homeland impossible? That's a contradiction that no one can ever answer for, because this claim that Palestinians have been offered a contiguous state is simply a lie.
All right, Jonathan, let me ask you a different way into this. When you listen to Aaron there, and you've listened to him many times before, I've listened to both of you many times before, what I would love to see is that there is an appreciation between you of some points of common ground, some basic things that you could find yourselves able to agree to. Because it seems sometimes that both sides are so intransigent, there's no give of anything. And so as I'm trying to get my head around how any of this gets resolved, you've got to start somewhere, right? Where do you start when you're trying to resolve this after this mayhem and this horrendous war with all the death toll on both sides? When you get to the other side, where are the points of agreement that you sense might be there that you can build some kind of settlement on?
Yes, I wish we would be able to see that going forward. And just to correct one thing without going into too many details, the Camp David proposal was for either 96 or 98% of Judea and Samaria. And I think it's very interesting to listen to former President Clinton, much to the dismay of the fringe elements in the Democratic Party. He told the story, and he really goes back and tells what happened at Camp David and why that was such a travesty, why that was such a tremendous historical miss, another opportunity missed by the Palestinians. And as the saying goes, they're excellent at missing opportunities, and it's sad. It's sad for them, and it's sad for me and my people who live here, who have to continue to live alongside them. Listen, the bottom line is Palestinian rejectionism. There is no other ethnic minority anywhere around the world that has fought against another ethnic minority, fought and lost, and has been given chance after chance after chance, resuscitated and artificially supported by most of, or many organizations and countries around the world in order to keep their so-called struggle alive. And
I have to jump in here. This argument is straight out of a colonial playbook. Palestinians resisting occupation isn't some bizarre anomaly. It's what anyone would do if their land and rights were systematically stripped away. Imagine calling the American Revolution rejectionism because the colonists refused to accept British rule. Resistance to oppression isn't rejectionism, it's survival. And framing it this way is just another attempt to shift blame and erase the context of decades of occupation and displacement. It's the rhetoric equivalent of kicking someone down a flight of stairs and blaming them for falling. Palestinians have every right to fight against policies and practices that strip them of basic human dignity.
I think that's the real sad part. If Palestinians were treated like any other minority or any other ethnic group in global history, then we would have solved this conflict long time ago. Israel has offered peace, has been rejected 4 times, and again, for some reason, Israel is being blamed for not wanting to do peace with the Palestinians. And by the way, we speak about democracy. It's, again, I think it's absurd. What's preventing the Palestinians from exercising democracy now? Why hasn't the Palestinian Authority had elections in the last, I think, 19 or 20 years? Why? Because they are corrupt, because they're hated. And what would happen is that Hamas would be elected. So maybe it's a good thing that they don't have democracy, but to lecture us about not wanting to end the conflict and not being serious in ending it, I think that's very wrong. I think it's false, and I think at the end of the day, it doesn't promote anything. Only when the Palestinians understand that they have to take their future into their hands and start building their country instead of trying to ruin ours, then when they will focus on their future, then maybe there will be a chance for peace, because the time goes by, we will continue to build our country. We'll continue to grow stronger and stronger, despite what so many of our haters and detractors think and want. It's not going to happen. And I'm sorry to disappoint so many people. Actually, I'm not sorry to disappoint, but this is how it's going to go. Israel is going to continue to exist in this rough neighborhood. We will continue to defend ourselves. We will continue to hold on to our land and to fight and defend ourselves despite being in a very rough neighborhood. And people may like it and they may not like it and they may throw allegations at us. At the end of the day, we will continue to be here and to defend ourselves against Iranians and Syrians and Lebanese and Palestinians and whoever tries to attack us, because we are defending our home.
Okay, Aaron, I mean, I noticed that Jonathan didn't really answer my question. Can you answer the same question in a way that at least gives people watching this hope that there can be at least a building block to some kind of settlement? I mean, are there points where you would say, you know what, the Israelis have a point?
Piers, we actually did find some common ground there and then answer it, because I agree with Jonathan that the Palestinian Authority is corrupt and hated. Now, we'll disagree, though, on why they're corrupt and hated. They're hated in the West Bank and Gaza because they collaborate with the Israeli occupation, as we're actually seeing right now, with the Palestinian Authority security services attacking Palestinians basically on Israel's behalf. And this is important because this, from Israel's point of view, was the reason why it undertook the so-called peace process. Yitzhak Rabin, shortly before he was assassinated, he pointed out that it's a lot cheaper for Israel to basically use a collaborationist authority in Palestine, the Palestinian Authority, to do the policing for them, to crack down on Palestinians as Israel proceeds to expand its settlements and take the West Bank land that it wants. And on the point about Camp David, this might seem for some people like a historical aside, but it's very important because it shows the lie that Palestinians have ever been offered a meaningful opportunity for their own state. Yes, Bill Clinton did say that Palestinians were offered this generous deal. Bill Clinton, though, has lied many times, including most infamously with his personal Monica Lewinsky scandal.
Well, Aaron isn't holding back here. Clinton's credibility is fair game, and it's a great reminder that even generous offers often come with ulterior motives. The peace process was never about real peace, it was about PR. Clinton's involvement highlights how the narrative was always skewed in Israel's favor. If someone's willing to lie about their own personal scandals, why wouldn't they stretch the truth about something as complex as the Middle East peace negotiations? And let's not forget, Clinton's own officials admitted the offers weren't viable. Clinton's own officials admitted the offers weren't viable. So what does that say about so-called generosity being touted here? It's smoke and mirrors and simply a facade to justify the unjustifiable.
But Bill Clinton has also said before he would take a bullet for Israel, he would go volunteer in the army and die in a ditch for Israel, even though he's a draft dodger when he was called to serve in Vietnam. So that speaks to Bill Clinton's bias here. And you don't have to listen to me. Robert Malley, who served under Bill Clinton, who was there at Camp David, he said the Palestinian position was simply having a contiguous state in the West Bank and Gaza. Israel never offered them that. And that's why I'll say it again. Shlomo Ben-Ami, the Israeli foreign minister who transmitted the Camp David offer, he said, if I were Palestinian, I would have rejected Camp David as well. That applies to all so-called Israeli offers because they've never given Palestinians the chance to have a state, even in just 22% of their historic homeland. Israel instead insists on building up these massive West Bank settlement blocks that make a Palestinian state impossible, that make Palestinian life impossible, that swallow up all the valuable land, all the water, while not offering Palestinians even a recognition of their right to return to their homes from which they were expelled in 1948. To find agreement, Palestinians have found it already. They've accepted a huge compromise. They accepted in 1988 Israel within its pre-1967 borders. That's the historic compromise you're looking for, Piers. It's Israel, by insisting on its self-proclaimed right to settle what it calls Judea and Samaria, which is the West Bank. It's them that have undermined any opportunity for a peace deal. And to enforce that, that's why they're now carrying out mass murder in Gaza, to wipe out any resistance to Israel, to actually build up new settlements inside Gaza, if we believe some Israeli officials, because they don't see Palestinians as equal human beings. They've stolen their land, and that's not enough. Now they want to wipe them out for good and displace as many people as possible. And you cannot make peace with with a state that has that mentality. For there to be peace, Israel will have to fundamentally rethink its foundational commitment to occupation and supremacy.
Aaron ends off this clip with the perfect mic drop moment. Aaron here cuts straight into the heart of the issue. Peace can't exist alongside occupation and supremacy. It's like trying to put out a fire while pouring gasoline on it. And let's not forget, this isn't just about land, it's about rights, dignity, and the ability for Palestinians to live as equals. Until the core mindset changes, nothing else will. You can't claim to want peace while doubling down on policies that make peace impossible. This is the convenient truth no one wants to face, and real peace requires real change, and that means dismantling the system of inequality that perpetuates this cycle of violence. Of course, we can point it out, but it's much more difficult to actually make it happen. As always, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. Do you agree or disagree with a lot of the points that Aaron or even Jonathan has made within this clip? Be sure to comment down below. Also, give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one.